I'm Elisa McCormick, and I am 17, and this is my second year in the Fuego program. Now, for my demo, I'm going to be creating a small and quick project, so please leave your suggestions in the comments. It can be anything like animals or some innate object that you want me to see, or that you want me to see weld out of some scrap metal.
So Elisa, are you asking our audience to tell us what they want you to make?
Yes, I am. I want to hear what your suggestions are, and I want to make one of your real comments, not a pickle. Because that got suggested to me a couple times. Now, this is my second year in the Fuego program, and I want to take you to look at some of the previous projects that I've made. So when I first started out, I had to take a pre-rec class, and these are two of the projects that I made. I have this hedgehog right here, and up here I have a turtle. Now, if you look real closely in here, you can see that these are the same pieces just replicated over and over and over again, and those same pieces are used up here in the turtle. Now, a lot of times when I make art, especially if I already know what I'm going to make, I tend to think about how can I break this down and how can I remake this out of components that repeat over and over and over again, which is why you see so many of the repeating parts. So for example, with the turtle, I was like, okay, I want to use these repeating parts. So I used that in the shell, and I was like, okay, now that I have a shell, what can I do that will really make this look like a turtle? And so we have this head right here, which has like a slight mouth kind of thing. And if we flip it over, last year they had a bunch of railroad spikes, like right here, and here. And I thought those would make some super cute little feet, along with this piece right here, which makes a tail. So now you can obviously tell it's a turtle. Now, I started Fuego, right? And so first thing I thought of was like, doing a bigger turtle or doing some other things. But then when it really came down to it, I had finally learned how to draw chains that year. And so I'm drawing these chains, and I ended up drawing this chain bird on it was originally like a plaque. And so Nico walks over and he's like, that's so morbid. I didn't realize you were that morbid. I thought you were a happy spunk kind of person. And this is where the second part of my art comes in. I like doing things out of spite or just doing things that seem impossible. So because Nico told me that it was too morbid for what my personality should be, I was like, that is what I'm gonna make. So you start here on the bottom. It's an incredibly heavy piece. So we had to get a bunch of big casters that would allow it to move around easily. And so this ball right here, you see these little tabs that are bent and misshapen. Although they look normal on the top, the bottom side of them is actually practice welds. These are the pieces of metal that we use when teaching kids how to weld. And on the underside, there's all these like scratch marks and dent marks, but I figured I'd reuse them and turn them into something cool, which is actually going to play into something important higher up. Now, we have this thick chain here, and I got it as a galvanized chain. So when I was welding it, it let off zinc fumes. And so I actually got zinc poisoning from doing this project. Not a fun experience, but the end result I think is worth it. If we move up, we see these pieces of rebar bent and curved. This is one of the first pieces I actually had to plan out. So I have a life-size drawing of all these pieces of rebar, which I used to measure out how long I needed to cut them. And so, if we continue even further up, we get into these wings here. And here's where I was talking about where it's a lot of recycled material. These pieces here are actually what I have holding in my hand. This is an electrode, and we use it to weld. It's what allows us to add metal to our thing. And when you start to learn how to weld, you tend to burn them up very fast, and you leave with these very long pieces. So usually they're coated in a layer, like on this, for example. And so I spent a good day or two just spending hours hitting off this slag of the burned ones. That way I could reuse it and weld them each individually on here to create a wing pattern. Now, this was last year. This time I had to go even bigger and even better. So we make something about a foot taller, naturally. Now, I'm a huge coffee drinker, and I know a bunch of people who also are. And I was like, what can I do that is coffee? And so I was talking with a friend, and they were like, giant French press. And I'm like, brilliant, exactly. And that's what I mean by bigger and better. So this was originally a French press. It had to have a stable base. There's actually, if you get real down in there, there is a pump down there that allows you to pump up the proposed coffee through the tubes that run all the way up to the top and out the dragon's head. Now, as we're going up, you see these pieces right here? These are the old gears that I found at CAS, and I'll get back to them later because they are an amazing partner to work with. So I spent a good hour or so cutting these in half and welding them in a certain pattern so they would link together. And again, I love reusing materials and finding materials that repeat easily. So having these to be scales was super useful. It curves all the way up at the top here, and it comes out of the mouth. And the head is actually one of the coolest pieces on here. Because if you really get up here, you can see all of these handles and knives are actually old silverware that I found and cut up into certain pieces. And again, we have these electrode bits showing another reuse thing. And something else that I added when working on Dragon and like other things like this is if you look right here on the side, that is a pattern weld. It is not a structural weld. It is a weld to add metal and a cool texture. And one other cool thing this does is the head will swivel, so you can swivel it out here and get your coffee. Now, as you can see, it's not full of coffee today, and that's because cleaning out coffee is a pain, especially if you're going to turn it into a fish tank. So as soon as I get it home, we're going to find some nice angelfish to be swimming around in circles in here. Now, I talked about how I like going bigger and better, and naturally that comes with competition. So I started off by making this small little paper clip. I mean, not necessarily small, but small enough. And so my friend decided to one-up me by making a paper clip about yay big out of 1-inch bar stock. Now, naturally, that was not okay by my terms. Thus, the 5.5-foot paper clip made out of chain and welded individually at each point. It has a little bit of flexibility in it because it is chain and because it is such a large piece. But you can clip paper if you find one big enough, of course. Yeah. Now, this was the first time being a Fuego that I actually got to work with a partner. I got to work with a place called Cass. Shout out to Cass, they were amazing. I really enjoyed working with them. And so I commissioned a piece for them, which is this giant butterfly. Now, I use a lot of reused materials, and 90% of these materials are materials I actually got from Cass. I went there a total of 3 times and took half a ton of steel, which is pretty impressive. So when I was starting this, Cass told me that they wanted something that they could hang on a wall. And they wanted something with the theme of reuse of materials. So I found a bunch of these materials that you would recognize. For example, the springs over here, these larger discs, which are in cars, more of these, and a bunch of gears like you see over here. Even a pair of tongs that you would use for cooking. And so I was like, what's something that's patterned and flat? Of course, a butterfly. So I started out with a basic layout of the design, and I showed him a concept picture, and I got approved. And so I laid it all out, and I realized that I needed something a little bit more stable to really show the design of the butterfly, which is where these pieces come in and they outline it, and they make it so everything can be filled in a space. Now, if we come around this way, I also decided to make a miniature butterfly, complete with a card holder, because I figured the other butterfly might be a little too big for a tabletop. Now, I'm going to show you guys how to weld something. You have a hood right over there that you should put on, and I'm going to go turn on the welder and vent hood. I'll be back in just a second.
As both Elisa and I get hooded up, I'll try to put the hood over the camera, and I'll just look away. Oh, good idea, Elisa. Good idea.
So we have some safety equipment that's super important when welding. We have our hood, which is going to protect us from the sunlight UV rays that come off of the light when you're welding. We also have a jacket, which is super important because there are UV rays, so you can get sunburned. There are also a lot of sparks that fly out everywhere. So let me just get this on. You want it all the way buckled up because you never know where a spark's going to fly. It's the same reason why you want to wear long pants with high boots, because otherwise a spark can fall into your ankle or into your foot where your shoe is, and it'll continue to burn your foot, and it's very uncomfortable. I've had the experience before. Now, finally, gloves. Super important. We do actually a little test with these, is we put them on and make sure you have enough dexterity for your fingers that you can move things. But because these gloves do heat up when you touch something hot, you want to be able to shake it off real fast, so that way your hands don't get burned. Now, I'm going to give you a short explanation of what I'm going to do here. metal to metal, or even two pieces of metal to each other. So we have to create a circuit. Thus, we have our ground clamp right here, meaning this entire table is lined. But don't worry, you'll be okay because you're not touching the positive end. The positive end is right here. This is what we call our stand. Now, the rope for this can get awfully heavy and stressful on your arms, so you always want to have it over your shoulder. There's a little clamp right here, which you'll see the inside of it, which may be kind of hard to see, is metal and it's conductive. So if we were to put it on here, you'd expect it to spark. But no, we have these ceramic plates. That way you can leave it down and work on your other things. But we have these, which are electrodes. The inside of them is metal, allowing you to conduct electricity through here, through your rod, into your piece, through the table, and back, creating a full circuit. Now, what am I going to try and make today?
We got one suggestion for a cat.
A cat? Cool. So, I'm going to start my design project. There's a few things that constitute what a cat is. Thus, we need to figure out what this are. I have these smaller pieces here. Do you want options? I can do a cat.
Oh, sorry. There was a cat or a dragonfly.
And a sea otter.
And a sea otter. I vote cat.
You vote cat? I'm going to do cat mainly because I have a lot of pieces that will work really well for a cat.
Yay!
So, we need to come up with some basic components that we can tell easily are a cat. So we need something that can be the head, and we need something that speaks ears really easily. So I have these two pieces here. We can put them on the sides and make a little head. And we also want to find a body. Let's see. We can do a triangle piece for the body, and we'll just place it like so. And so we need to have little paws for the top and little feet for the bottom. So that should be enough pieces. Yes, one other thing. It needs to have a tail. And that's kind of how my creative process goes. I look at my materials and I see what I have and what can I do with those. Now, let's start. Getting on the gloves for safety. I'm going to start with the head. I'm going to use two pieces to help stabilize it where I would like to. And I'm going to place the ears on it. Real quick, I'm going to grab a pair of pliers because this is a very small project. And I don't have enough dexterity in my fingers to actually hold it with my hands.
Elisa has, like I said, been one of our most prolific Fuegos. They all make so many extraordinary projects. Elisa is able to pump out at least 2 or 3 in a day, which is a feat to say the least.
Okay. Now, one important thing to keep in mind, especially when you're welding around other people. Whenever somebody says cover, that means they're about to start welding. So when I say cover, I want you to flick down your hood to keep your eyes safe from being sunburned or hurt. If it does happen, you should be okay. It's just like glancing out the sun for just a second. Now, I have my rods here. I'm going to place a rod in my stinger, which is my positive. I don't want that to touch the table. I'm going to grab my pliers. Here. And what do you think? Outside like that? Does that make it look like a cat? Cool. Now, I want you to cover. And I'm going to start the weld. Now that I've tacked that on in 2 places, you never want to keep this in here. Accidentally touch the table, it'll start sparking. No fun. So we have one ear on. Let's turn it slightly to the side and grab our secondary ear. Now we want to make sure these are kind of going in the same direction. So we will grab these with our pliers. Let's see, it's going kind of like that. Like so. Yes, I want the ears to kind of go out. So I will weld this like so, so that we start creating our little top base. level, like so. So I'm going to hold it here with one hand, and I'm going to come around to the back and back. Now this is all tack welding here, which is not the most stable kind of welding. What you usually want to do is when you have a bit more time, you tack your ends and you weld in between. That way you create a really strong, really stable weld. Back in here. Okay. Now you see it's a little bit iffy on the face, and that's where we kind of need our tail. So when we put our tail on to make sure it stands upright, we want to have it slightly angled back so it helps weight out where some of that head weight. So I'm going to lay it on its side, and to this side, I will weld the tail in just like this. Now you can already see that it's starting to form something that looks like a cat. Now the one thing we're missing here. No. Never mind. Okay. Now we have these tiny, tiny pieces. These can be the most annoying things to weld. Something like that is usually much easier for me because I'm used to welding larger pieces where I don't actually have to hold pieces in place. So I'm just going to leave these on the ground again because the V table is live, and I am going to attach them right there and right there. Now, if you notice, my rod has already gotten significantly shorter, and that is because you're using in this metal right here to help attach things together. Now, this is too short for me to continue welding with because if I keep going, I may accidentally burn it into the stinger, which is no fun. I have a pocket where we can drop those up and down. Got a new rod. I'm going to put it in my stinger. Everybody cover. Excellent. Now I've got a little piece. Let's add in a little paw here. Just one at a time. Even. Yeah. A lot of things totally happen in place while you're welding. It's much easier using the weld that can have your other arm ability. But this time because we're trying to have so small, we need to actually hold it in place for my thing. Turn it around. Right there. Now I'm going to turn it around and add that final snap paw. Same procedure. Pick it up. Place it where I'd like to. Excellent. And right there, we have our little pack in 10 minutes.
Incredible work, Elisa. Thank you so much for sharing your amazing demo with your welding. How long have you been welding at the Crucible?
I have been welding since roughly 7th grade, and this was actually the first class I took here at the Crucible. And ever since I took it, I've fallen in love with the art.
We are so grateful that you have shown us a live welding demo as part of our Fuego 2020 reception this evening. Let's give a wonderful brava to Elisa McCormick as we say ta-ta for now and head off to our next Fuego leader.
Bye.